All right, so Dog Bites this week is all going to be Brandon's breakout stars, the 5 players that he expects to kind of break through and make a big impact for the season. For Brandon, it all starts with Zachariah Branch, someone that we heard so much about through fall camp. Just the athleticism, the different dynamic he's going to bring to not just the receiver room, but also the special teams. Do you think that he can amount to all this hype and pressure that's already been put on him, Brandon?
Well, I'll tell you this about Zachariah Branch, and I'm ashamed to say this, but it is true. When a former 5-star receiver is at a place like USC, I have a certain picture in my mind of what I think that guy is going to be. And so far, Branch is far different what I imagine him being based on his time speaking to the media during spring practice and what others have said about him. I hate to say it, but I sort of assume there might be a certain sense of entitlement there or kind of a celebrity persona or something along those lines. It seems like Branch is pretty well salt of the earth. So he and his brother Zion both probably wouldn't be at Georgia if that weren't true. And so, yeah, when it comes to some attention and some accolades and some expectations, honestly, not just the athleticism, which we know that he has, but the way in which it seems like Branch is fitting into the program, I think all of that lead me to believe that, yeah, he can very much be the sort of player that Georgia needs him to be, which is a productive wide receiver and a guy who kind of raises the statistical profile of that group. And by the way, fills in for some, of what, kind of Georgia, got a year ago, even from guys who are no longer here. Some of that is the job of Branch as well. And I think he's set up pretty well to be able to do that.
Your next breakout star is another transfer wide receiver, the one from Texas A&M, Noah Thomas, who headed into this first week. I thought we'd hear a lot more preseason national media hype about Noah Thomas because he's really what Georgia was lacking last year in the wide receiver room. But he's kind of been overshadowed by how excited people are about Zachariah Branch, but another guy that continued to impress during fall camp. I know Jeff Santel's really high on him as his breakout star, so not surprised that you've got him in this spot.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to make a small wager on Georgia's leading receiver, Thomas would actually be my guy that I believe will lead the team in receiving. I think he's faster than people realize. I have a theory that people assume that Texas A&M players are slow. I think they wear ugly uniforms, and I think the players look slower than they actually are. Thomas is faster than people realize. He's also obviously a big-bodied receiver here too. And this was a guy that, while nationally just more people know Zachariah Branch. He came from USC, former 5-star. People just know him better. I would say, though, that what those close to the Georgia program have been at least suggesting to me is that Thomas has been there step for step, every step of the way with Branch. And internally, I think that Noah has been just as impressive as we maybe think that Branch is going to be. So I wouldn't, risk my whole life on this, but small wager here. I think that Thomas probably ends up being Georgia's leading receiver.
Now we'll move to the defensive side of the ball for the next breakout star. It's going to be the 5-star defensive lineman, Elijah Griffin, who we know took a lot of meaningful snaps in camp. I think when it comes to Elijah Griffin breaking out, it's not a matter of if it happens, it's a matter of when it's going to happen.
And as I tout him as a breakout star, I also want to carefully here also temper expectations somewhat, because I don't know what breakout star necessarily means for freshman defensive linemen. I think Griffin's going to play. I think he's going to flash and have some moments. Asking him to be one of this team's best defensive linemen in this particular year, that may still be asking for a lot. But can you come up big in a few big moments? I mean, honestly, that's sort of what Georgia did last year against Texas. I don't know that the defensive front had a great year for Georgia last year, but boy, they sure were great against Texas, and a lot of individual guys contributed to that. I'm speaking primarily here about the game in October in Austin. And so I think that some of that could be true for Griffin too, where he's mostly solid, he's good enough to play, and maybe at the exact right time, he has a couple of moments where he just completely sheds a blocker and goes and makes something great happen. I think this is probably the player on the Georgia roster that has the single highest upside. That may be a year or two away from sort of fully coming into fruition, but he's clearly going to play this year, and there are going to be moments in which I think the Georgia fans are very glad to have it.
Yeah, for him, I think it's all about timing. I wouldn't expect to see some big breakout game early on in the year, especially while he's adjusting to the SEC schedule. I think especially at the defensive line, it takes some time to get used to the physicality that you're going up against. So I think Elijah Griffin will be the one to have the breakout season, but I don't expect that right away. Now, someone who may not even have the option of getting used to the timing is your next breakout star, which is Juan Gaston. And we may be able to look at him as the breakout star of camp just based on the fact that there's a good chance that he might start game 1, game 2. If not, we know he's going to get into that rotation early on. A lot of preseason buzz, but I don't even think that you and I could have anticipated how quickly he was going to get involved in this offense, that even though they lost a lot on the line, they still bring back some guys, and we know that they have some depth. But for him, he may not have the option of the same amount of timing as Elijah Griffin has.
No, I think you're right. I think he's going to, look, I lean heavily on people who I feel like know more than I do, and people who know more than I do have told me directly they believe that Gaston is one of Georgia's best 5 offensive linemen right now. Now, we have also, especially at the beginning of the season, seen Georgia rotate its offensive line a bunch. So I think there's a chance that Gaston starts. I think there's a chance that when you get to the crucial moments this season, he may be the guy on the field. I also think in the early going, he and Michael Uini and obviously Micah Morris, who we sort of have penciled in at left guard, there may be some rotation here. I'd love to see Daniel Calhoun work his way in and be a part of that too, just because you need as many contributing above the line offensive linemen as you can get. But at the very least, you're going to have a rotation among those 3. And I do think that Gaston has really wowed people since coming in. And I don't know that's what I would have expected him to do fresh out of high school, just for various reasons. It sounds like he was already really impressive on kind of the all-star camp circuit before he came to Georgia. Spring practice seemed to go really well. We're led to believe he's now slimmed down, which makes him an even better player potentially, just has the ability to move a bit better. I think that Juan Gaston is probably one of Georgia's 5 best offensive linemen, and I do think adding in a starter-level player from your high school recruiting class, I think that should definitely be viewed as a very big win for Georgia.
All right, so last one is the big one. It's Ellis Robinson, a guy that we talked about earlier. I think that this is the one person that all of DawgNation wants to see have that breakout season. You don't want all of that money you spent on Ellis Robinson just sitting on the sideline. So this is a need for Ellis.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in the concept of premium positions. If you look at who in the NFL generates the most free agent dollars, which positions most frequently get drafted in the first round, to me, those are the positions that I think should be considered the most important. It's quarterback, it's offensive tackle, it's wide receiver, it's edge rusher, it's defensive line, and it's cornerback. And listen, Georgia, thankfully, as a Georgia fan, has a lot of very good players. It seems like that a lot of the Georgia players and a lot of the spots where Georgia's strongest are sometimes not quite what the NFL views necessarily as its most premium positions. Well, the potential emergence of Ellis Robinson's a big deal because he does play one of those premium positions. And if you've got the veteran cornerback starting on the other side of Dalen Everett, this gives Georgia to have a chance of at least 2 really good cornerbacks at one of the most important spots in the field. And, Daniel Harris, I think, is a guy that Georgia's still very happy to have. And, I would say that there's a really good chance that DeMello Jones comes on as well. But the best that I can tell is Robinson may be a little ahead here of the others here right now. He's obviously the guy that has the highest former recruiting ranking. And if he really pops the way that the chat around him suggests might, I think it's a big deal for Georgia because of the position that he plays.